Teaching on encounters, explaining them just a little bit further, because every time we're just chipping away, explaining a little bit more about encounters. If you guys have noticed probably by now, we teach on something, and then we go on an encounter. And then we teach on something, and then we go on an encounter. The reason why is because encounters speak to your heart. Encounters are the Lord ministering to you. So how many of you guys know about head knowledge, or you guys have heard of that 18-inch gap before? Okay. A lot of people that are in the church, we have got so much information. They've been a Christian their whole life. They've read the word. They've got all this head knowledge, but it's not a heart revelation to them. And so there's so much brokenness and depression and devastation in their heart because they've never let the Lord minister to their heart. So when we're teaching to your head, and then we take you on an encounter to heal the heart. And that's what you guys get invited to do, even when you're listening to sermons or going to other conferences and they're not doing the encounters. As you're taking something in with your head, you can say, Lord, what do you think about this? And he'll filter it for you. He'll say, this is good, spit out that, that's me, that's wrath stuff, you can throw that one out, like all the stuff that you get to filter it, and then he's healing and bringing revelation to your heart, even like if it's something that's totally not quite his heart, you can see, oh, well, now I'm learning that this isn't your heart. Like, it's really awesome. So encounters, I just wanted to explain, they change this. So you no longer have an 18-inch gap. What is here, you take to the Lord and becomes here, and this is healed, and this is whole, and this is one. The whole goal is to have a whole soul, okay, for this to be one. The Jews don't have an 18-inch gap. They have very, very healthy souls because they know how to process things, and they're very soul-healthy people. The Greeks introduced Hellenistic thinking, which brought the separation of mind and heart, okay? So we want to get back to oneness, which is what encounters do. All right. Now, we are going to talk about grief. I feel like I'm a little bit loud. Am I a little bit loud? Okay. In my ears, I feel like I'm a little bit loud, but we'll just go with it. Grieving and grief. Again, something that the Western church, Western culture does not do very good, which is why it is so important for us to talk about it and why we are so broken, because we shut down emotion and we control. Nope, this is not okay right now. We stuff. But grieving, it needs to get out of our heart, otherwise it causes sickness. There's a book that the title is Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And it's so, so true. So the Jews, they know how to grieve healthily. They know how to get it out, and then they're free. Then they're healed, and they move on with life. Where the Western culture, we carry the stuff. And 20 years later, we're still carrying the grief and the devastation of deep sorrow and deep pain. And so it's important to understand the need and the beauty of getting it out. In Matthew 5:4, it says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." That's like a super common. Most people have heard that verse. Okay, great. I'm blessed if I cry. What? Like, sure. So then you let yourself cry once, but definitely not with people. Like, and then you're like, okay, I've been comforted. Now I can move on with my life. Like, we don't understand the mechanics of grief. So when pain happens to you, when trauma happens to you, your heart has a crisis. Your heart has this emotion that is real, that is tangible. So the different things that you can grieve, like the death of a loved one or a pet, whatever you love, when you lose it, it causes grief to you. Someone moving, they didn't die, but there's a change or a death in a relationship, and that can be devastating to a heart. Monetary things can be things that you need to grieve over. So for example, your house is robbed and you lose your grandmother's antique jewelry that was just so, so special to you. Like, even though it's a monetary thing, your heart is experiencing grief and experiencing devastation. You can bring it to the Lord and talk with him about that. So a lot of times people will feel shame, like, I shouldn't feel grieved about this. I should feel fine about this because Christians shouldn't. And then they stuff it instead of saying, okay, this is where my heart is at. Maybe I shouldn't have had such attachment to monetary things, but I'm in process. I do have grief right now, so I'm going to let it out. So whatever you're grieving, whatever you faced, we're not going to carry shame about grieving over that thing. okay? So that's one thing to get off of you. I want to share with you the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. But we're going to back up and explain it, okay? John 11, Lazarus has died. But I'm going to prove to you that Jesus was planning on waking him up or raising him from the dead. So after he had said this is Jesus, went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going to wake him up. What's funny, this is John 11. If you keep reading through that passage, then they're like, well, if he's asleep, then why don't they wake him up? And he's like, okay, fine. You're going to make me say it. He's dead. And we're going to wake him up, okay? Jesus, if you notice, he did not acknowledge lack, which is awesome, okay? He just called it sleeping. When the little girl died, he's like, she's asleep, okay? He didn't recognize lack because lack is of the enemy. Lack is from hell, and he lives from heaven. Just a little tip there. So he was planning, he knew we're going to wake Lazarus up. Now, John 11 down to verse 32. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her were also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. They then took Jesus to the tomb, and there Jesus wept. Jesus was already planning on raising Lazarus from the dead. But what he did is he took Mary to the source of her grief. And he said, I will grieve with you. I will let the pain out of your heart, because if you don't get the grief out, yes, your brother came back from the dead. That's awesome, but you'll be stuck in this grief. So I'm going to take you to the source. Where have you laid him? We're going to go to the tomb. We are going to cry. We're going to release healing to your heart, and then I will raise Lazarus from the dead. The kindness of Jesus to do this, and the importance, the value that he put on grieving. He didn't say, oh, Mary, you'll be fine. Just give me 5 minutes. Watch, okay? He knew what her heart was going through, and he let her grieve it out and release it out. So to grieve healthily, we turn towards the Lord in our pain, because what we most of the time do, maybe 99.999% of the time, is anytime that we feel pain, we pull away from the Lord, okay? That's the twisted heart, that's the any type of pain. But especially when we're grieving, we just kind of turn inward, and I don't have any other way to express it other than that physical, like you're turning away from the Lord. But to grieve with him is to turn your face to him, fully acknowledging the pain and giving it to him. And that is how to healthily grieve. We're experiencing the waves of emotion as they come. It's okay that they're coming. My heart process is okay. I'm not going to shut my heart down. As we're feeling these things, I'm going to keep turning to him and giving them to him and turning my face towards him in this pain. And the Lord taught me this when I was in a season of going through a miscarriage. It was the first time in my life I'd gone through lots of ugly things before, and I had always pulled my heart away. And I had learned enough about encountering him and connecting with him that I knew I needed Jesus. He is the only one that brings healing. He's the only one who can heal my soul. And I knew from that, I did not want to have the enemy have any more of a win than he already did. I didn't want to have any devastation, any pain, any trauma in my life. I didn't want to have anything moving forward, even trauma in my body, which Emily's going to get to in the next session. I didn't want to carry anything moving forward into the future. I was like, I want to agree with life. I want to stand in your will to the best that I can. And so knowing that in my pain, I turned to the Lord. And what I would do, it was hourly, minutely, secondly. Any time that I felt the waves of pain and the waves of grief coming over me, I would turn to the Lord and say, God, I give you all of this. I don't know how to process it. I don't know why my prayers didn't work. I don't know why this happened. And all the questions. Bill Johnson says, to have peace that surpasses understanding, you have to give up your right to understand. So I could have sat there and said, I want the answers. Why was this allowed to happen? Why couldn't I stop it? Why didn't you stop? All those accusations. I could have held the wrath and held on to the anger that I had in my heart. And I was like, no, I want peace. I want you more than I want answers. So I'm surrendering my right to understand. And I have an altar that's my surrender place in heaven. So I would go and I would lay down all the questions, all the devastation, all the pain, and I would go and I would sit with him. And when I was talking earlier this morning about just going and sitting with the Lord in stillness, that's what I did in that season. Moment by moment, hour by hour, day by day, go and sit with him because he knows. He knows everything. He knows my pain. He knows what I'm needing for my heart. So I can just sit with him and just let his healing wash over me. And sometimes we would cry together when I'd put my stuff on the altar, and then I'd go and I'd sit, and we have this like tree, and we sit underneath the tree by a brook. And sometimes we would cry together. Sometimes he would bring up something. Other times he'd just sit there and he would hold me. But I was intentional that any time that I felt anything other than heaven, I would go back to that place. So anything from depression, discouragement, frustration, anger, the cycle that you have, fear of what about it happening in the future. If I felt anything outside of heaven, that was my invitation, that was my trigger to go back to that place. So I'd go back to the Lord and say, okay, I'm putting the fear, I'm putting the question, I'm putting the pain, I'm putting everything on there, and I'm going to go and sit with you. And I had such surrender in my heart because I knew I need Jesus. I only need Jesus. I need Jesus. I need Jesus. I need Jesus. I had such surrender in my heart that he was actually able to heal things in my heart that I hadn't surrendered to him yet. I didn't even realize that I was still holding on to things that were from the past, but I was secretly holding on to them because they were down in the basement. But because of the pain and the grief, it was finally to the surface, and I was like, okay, I can't afford to hold anything against the Lord anymore. So the questions that I was like, oh God, like, where were you with this or this or this? I had to lay those on there because it's like there can't be anything between me and Jesus. So then in that place, just letting him heal me, the first things that he healed had nothing to do with the miscarriage. And I was like, okay, I mean, cool, I'm glad that you're talking about this. Like, I'm glad for healing. Why aren't you talking about the miscarriage? But the miscarriage, he was just letting the pain out. He was just letting the grief flow, letting my heart be washed over with his love and washed over with his healing. So the Jews, when they grieve, they say that there's a 30-day process of grieving. It's not like it has to be 30 days, but it actually has been 30 days for me. It's been 30 days for Hannah. When I've talked with people about the grieving process and you're fresh in it, it is 30 days that I've seen. It's been right around that mark. That anytime you feel the emotion, out in public, at home, doesn't matter. For when you're in the Hebrew culture, you are expected to cry and grieve anywhere. Doesn't matter. You go down the grocery store and all of a sudden the grief hits you. You weep right there in the grocery store. And the beautiful thing about the Hebrew people is they will come and weep with you. A stranger who doesn't even know you will come and stand with you and mourn with you in your pain. They don't know your pain. They don't know what you're going through, but they will stand there with you and grieve to help you get that pain out of your heart. And then that wave is gone, you've let it out, and you keep shopping. Okay? So 30 days of that, and then the grief is done. The pain is done. So it will never be okay that my baby died. God did not cause it. It was not his will. It will never be okay. However, I have peace, and I am whole in the midst of those circumstances. And that's the bigness of God. So at the end, there's not the grief and the weight and the sadness and the crushing pain anymore. I'm whole. I'm whole because he's that big and he's that good. So if there's a current thing that you're dealing with, then grieve and let the waves come. Just because someone doesn't understand the grocery store, just because someone doesn't understand at church, our culture is afraid of crying. It's a sign of weakness, we think, okay? It's your choice if you want to come under that or if you want to do things healthily. It's up to you. You get to choose, okay? You can choose that anywhere when I feel the wave, I'm going to let it out. Because when you stuff it, it's harder to go back and access those old things. So as the wave comes, you let it out, and you let it out, and you let it out. And at the beginning, it'll be minute by minute. And then it goes hour by hour. And then it goes day by day, and it gets just the same thing with forgiveness. How sometimes you have to forgive someone 1,000 times, and the first time is the hardest, then it gets a little bit easier, a little bit easier, a little bit easier. That process until it doesn't sting anymore, it's the same thing with grieving. You let it out, it out, and you let it out, and then the pain gets healed. So you get to decide when you're grieving something in the moment, grieving something fresh, how you grieve. But I would invite you to let it out, to connect with the Lord anytime, anywhere, to make that choice. And there's not even a comparable difference to grieving when you pull away and you stuff and you hide, and then you try and like pinch yourself at night because now I'm finally home and I'm allowed to cry, but I don't feel the waves coming over me, okay? Versus letting it, turning to Him, being okay with process, being okay with crying. Jesus wept. He's pretty great, okay? Crying's not scary, and letting it out. Now, grieving something that has passed is something that you can go on an encounter with, and we say, all right, Lord, I have pent up pain, I have pent up emotions about this thing that was a long time ago, but I'm still carrying it. Will you help me unlock that? Take it out of the vault, out of the basement, bring it up, and so I can give it to you and release it out. And that sometimes He does in a moment, and again, sometimes with that it's a process. But your indicator is anytime that you feel something outside of heaven. So if you think about that old event again and you still have a, then bring it to the Lord. If you think about it later and all you feel is love, then you've healed. Your grieving time is done. You've released it. The goal is that all you feel is love. The same thing is with forgiveness. Like when I was going through lots of forgiveness a year ago, the Lord was like, you are not allowed to speak until all you feel is love. Okay. So He was saying speak to them because I was hurt. And so there's words coming from hurt. And He says, I do not want you to speak to them until all you feel is love. And so I had to forgive. But then I'm in love. And now I'm healed and now I'm whole. So when you're grieving, the goal is all you'll feel is love. When I look back over the season of the miscarriage, all I feel is Jesus. All I see is His love. All I see is His goodness. Because He's that big. And then going back and grieving things that were before that. So that was the first time that I learned how to grieve with the Lord. What about all the other times that I didn't grieve with Him? As you go back and you pull those things out of the basement and you let Him heal those, it's the same thing. All you feel is love. It doesn't matter the trauma. It doesn't matter. Okay, trauma matters. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter the trauma. Trauma matters. It's a big deal. Trauma is trauma. Okay? That being said, God is bigger than that. His love is bigger than that. So that when you look back, all you feel is Him. All you see is His goodness, even over the most horrible of things. So, we're going to ask Jesus about this. Mr. Stephen. When we're talking about grief and process and control and all those wonderful things, it's also going to come up again when we're talking about fear in a little bit. It is so helpful in your journey to come to terms with hard times. Jesus guaranteed hard times on the earth. It's something that we would love to have a pain-free life. That would be wonderful. However, it's not like that here on this earth. Jesus said, take heart, I have overcome the world. You will have tribulations of many kinds. Take heart, I've overcome the world. So when you come to terms with saying, all right, the hard times are going to happen. God's not causing it. God's not punishing me. But I'm going to stay surrendered in whatever circumstances are coming. My hope is Jesus, no matter what the circumstances are. You realize that the current sufferings aren't worth comparing to the glory. You realize that even though it's a big deal right now, it's but a vapor. And that's hard to grasp at the beginning because it's such a big deal. How can this be a vapor? How could I not compare this to the glory? But as you grow and as you mature in your relationship with the Lord, you get it at deeper and deeper levels. It's nothing. Jesus is so big and he's so good, and you can walk through trauma and you can walk through pain, and all you see is him and all you feel is him. So we're going to talk to Father when we're learning about grief. So why don't you close your eyes with me. Father, what would you like to tell me about grief? Father, how do I grieve? Father, are you bigger than my grief and pain? Father, is there anything that you want me to grieve right now? If he brings something up, then how he showed you to grieve, I want to invite you to step into that. I break off the fear of weeping. I break off the fear of grieving. This is a safe place. And we're choosing to let Jesus heal our grief. Just let his love wash over you. We're going to say, Father, what do I need to surrender? What do I need to lay down to fully grieve and let this out? And if he shows you something that you need to surrender in order to grieve, then pull it out of your heart and give it to him. Surrender it to him. Oftentimes it's the where were you? Why did this happen? When we hold on to those questions, instead of surrendering to get peace, you're holding on to that right to understand. But I invite you to release those questions. Release and submit, surrender to him the pain, all the weight. As you feel betrayal or rejection or disappointment or discouragement, keep releasing those to the Lord. If it is not in heaven, you don't have to carry it. For some of you, as you start calling up the stuffed grief and the grief that's been stuffed down, there'll be more and more waves of pain, and there'll be greater and greater pain. Just keep surrendering those to the Lord. As the waves of pain wash over you, release it to Him and let His love wash over you. It's okay for it to come in waves. That's normally how it happens. So as it comes, just keep releasing it. Keep releasing it. Keep letting go. Asking some questions. Father, should I be afraid of grieving? Father, why have I been afraid of grieving? he shows you why you have been afraid to grieve, you're going to say, Father, what is the truth? When he shares with you the truth, you can choose to decide if you want to hold on to being afraid of grieving or if you want to agree with what he says. So we're saying, I break agreement with the lie, and then share whatever he just told you about the lie you are believing about grieving. Then we're saying, instead of this lie, Father, I choose to believe your truth about grieving. I choose to no longer fear it. Jesus, what will my heart look like if I choose to not grieve, if I stuff it? Picture with, Father, what does my heart look like as I grieve and heal? Get to pick between those two hearts that you saw. You guys get to decide if you're going to let the grief out or if you're going to stuff it. Jesus, thank you for making a way for the pain to get out of our heart. Jesus, thank you for being big enough to heal every pain. For being big enough in the midst of terrible circumstances to be able to still give us peace and joy. Father, when can I come back and grieve the things that I've stuffed? Would you guys take a deep breath with me? The deep breath helps relax the body, helps the body to agree with what just happened. So I want to encourage you to be free to grieve and let it out and not be afraid of it. It's God's gift to you to let the pain out so that we're not stuck with the pain. We have a way to get it out, and we can go to Him in that. We're not going to call it a break, but I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to write in your journals, just like 2 minutes, because I feel like there's some of you that need to write some stuff down. So if you need to run to the bathroom, if you want to write some stuff down, literally 2 minutes, and then Emily's going to share.